What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the new podcast, episode 2. We're here with the squad. Um, we have me, Omes, Milos, Strajnia, Bryce, Sky, Carl, and we have a special guest today, and Father Deacon Michael. Introduce yourself.
For everybody else.
Yes, for everybody else who doesn't know you.
Okay. Well, I'm Deacon Michael. I am, what do I say? I'm a deacon in the Antiochian Archdiocese of North America. My family, my wife and I and my 3 daughters, we live in North Idaho. We love North Idaho, love the beauty and the weather. I don't think I've had a chance to even come down from the Divine Liturgy, because even though it was just a couple hours ago, but I think I'm still there. So forgive me.
Oh, that's fine. You're originally a convert, right?
I am, yes. My wife and I actually, we came into the church around, I think it was 2006, 2007. That's a really long story, but I can sum it up with, if you know of now Father Turbo Qualls.
Yes.
He's the priest at St. Mary's in Kansas City, Missouri. Back before, I think he was only Orthodox for about 2 years. He had just come into the church, wasn't a priest. I had just, how do I say this? I had just finished up a career as a musician, and I started getting back into technical work. And I had always been we had been lifelong friends at that point since we were much younger. And he introduced the church to us. So that's, I thank Turbo for introducing us to the church, and I thank God for bringing us home to his church.
I'm not sure, but I think he has a podcast as well on YouTube, but I might be mistaken.
Yeah, if it's okay if I plug it, is that okay?
Of course.
So The Royal Path, you can find it on YouTube. There's a couple other guys that he's on with, I believe it's weekly. And then even a most recent episode of something I saw from him on a channel called Floridoxy, and it was an interview with Father Turbo, so you can look that up as well.
Well, we have Sky here who lives in Florida. I don't know if it has to do anything with Florida, but probably does.
Orthodox.
Yes.
You might know.
Floridoxy. Sounds good.
Florida's pretty cool. What can I say?
Yes. So thank you for joining us. We appreciate it a lot. We just started this podcast, so we're still looking like how we're gonna do this and stuff. But the topic for today are holy elders and saints of Greece. I know you're a fan, if I might say that, of them, including Saint Yakovos of Evia. Is that true? Yes.
Very true. In fact, I'm blocking his icon, but his icon is right here.
Yes. So he's the island of Evia, or I'm not sure if he's originally from there, but he eventually ended up there, I think.
Yeah, his story is actually pretty amazing. I won't go into it. It's really long, but it's absolutely.
Go ahead. That's what we're here for.
Well, Lord have mercy. Can I just say first and foremost, I want to steal a quote from Father Seraphim Rose, because I know this can be kind of a hot topic for people. I don't presume to speak for the church, right? The church speaks for herself, and I'm taking his quote, but just summarizing it. The church speaks for herself. She speaks in her beauty, in her services, in the sacraments, in her theology, in her ritual. I don't need to speak for her at all, and nor would I ever presume to. But I will speak from my experiences and try to convey to anyone who's willing to listen, the experiences I've had. So now that that's out of the way, also I just want to say, no matter what you think you hear or anything along those lines, I'm just a struggling Orthodox Christian trying to do the best I can. I don't presume to be an elder or like a spiritual father or anything along those lines. I'm really a total buffoon when it comes to the spiritual life. I'm just trying to do the basics and learn to love God and love people.
Well, so do we all, I think. I hope.
Thank God.
Yes. Indeed.
So Saint Jacobos, it's kind of interesting. I mean, first and foremost, I know we talked just a little bit about the topic for the show, and I don't think that one show could even sum up the beauty of all of the beautiful Greek saints. And that would just be like a little small glimpse, into the window of the church's holy saints. But I found myself in the last probably year and a half, 2 years, finding those obscure books, like the little small books that are on the bookshelf, not the theology ones or, some of the other big, beautiful books, but really looking at like the obscure, small, like for instance, I prepared a little bit. So St. David of Evia, I'm sorry for my ring lights in the way, but St. David of Evia, this is just a little pamphlet. It's really super thin, but it's produced by, I think, the Holy Monastery of St. David. And so it's an English translation. Yeah, it's produced by the monastery. So I find myself gravitating towards these saints that I've never heard of, right? Or holy elders I've never heard of. For example, like Elder Harlampos, he was a
Yes.
co-struggler in Joseph the Hesychist. And
Indeed.
what a beautiful saint. I know technically he's not, a saint canonized by the church, but just what a beautiful man.
Well,
So that's how I found Saint Jacobos.
yes. I must say I never heard of him before you mentioned him, so I was very intrigued about reading him because I did a little bit of research, and he has a beautiful story. There's a lot of saints on Evia I didn't know about. I've never been there, unfortunately, even though I live very close when I go to Greece. But yeah, I read that he did a lot of wonders with the skulls of Saint David, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
They have
he's
healing
known
powers.
for being very bold.
Yes, Saint David lived in, I think, the 1600s.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, and he used his skull for a lot of wonders, and uh, he had a beautiful story. Could you maybe sum it up a little bit for the people that watch the show?
Yeah, for Saint David or Saint Jacobos, which one?
You could do both if you like.
Sure. So when I discovered Saint Jacobos, it was, I would say by accident, but I know that there's no accidents when it comes to the Lord. Like I call it his providential coincidence, meaning that like it was a coincidence to me, but it was his will. And so when I found the book Garden of the Holy Spirit is the book that's in English. I think it's in Greek as well, but it's definitely, there's an English book called Garden of the Holy Spirit. It's about Saint Jacobos' life. And to quickly sum up his life, I would say we as Westerners, and I'll say that even though some of us may live east of me, we're all Westerners. We have this kind of Western acclamation to the world, right? We truly, I don't think, know what it means to struggle and to not have something. But St. Jacobos, in his time, I'm going to take these off because they keep reflecting the light, so forgive me. In his time, when he was little, the Turks had invaded Greece. It was one of the many times the Turks had come in to invade Greece. And he was very small. In fact, I believe he was almost an infant. His dad was taken away. St. Jacobos' dad was taken away by the Turks to a work camp. They don't ever know really what happened to him. I mean, the Lord knows, but we can assume that people, when they're taken off to the work camps, you either died along the road or were taken out along the road, or you made it to the work camp and eventually died in the work camp. But his mom and his grandmother and his sister were shuffled off like almost everybody else and put on a migrant ship down at the harbor. So they had to leave everything that they know or that they knew. Yeah. They could only take a small amount of things with them, and they were put on the ship. And then I believe they were taken north up the coast and dropped off somewhere else in Greece. and where they were dropped off. And forgive me for not having all the details, but truly, if you want to know about his life, there's even videos, and I can send you a video, Demos, both in Greek and in English subtitles about Saint Jacobos' life. It's absolutely beautiful. It's like an hour and 50 minutes. I felt like I never wanted it to end.
If I might
But
interrupt really quickly, my
please,
family, like many other Greeks, suffered a similar fate under the Turks. So my family had to leave in one of those harbors as well, and they eventually ended up in Athens. But I think Saint David was the same period, so 1922, if I'm not mistaken.
Saint Jacobos, yeah, he was
Yes.
early, because he reposed, I think, in the late 80s, early 90s, if I can remember correctly. I kind of get them mixed up because I've been reading about the Holy Elder of Patmos and some others, and they're all kind of within the last 150 years.
Yeah.
So forgive
And
me
there's
for
also Saint Nectarius
Mhm.
of Aegina.
Yeah.
And all those
Wasn't
others.
wasn't Elder Iakovos canonized like 5 years ago? I think recently. That's what I'm recalling from memory.
As far as I know, you may be right, and I believe he was canonized within like 3 years of his repose. Like it was really fast.
Yeah, that's right.
He was so beloved. So you might be right. It may have been a little later, his when he reposed.
Yes, because that's very unusual normally.
Yeah, it usually takes a little while for most holy elders and saints, but I mean, me telling you about his life won't do it justice. I think reading or watching the video that I'll send you, there's a lot known about him, and even to the point where it gave me hope because I try to love people. I genuinely love to spend time with people, and so talking is kind of both it's like a blessing and a curse. I can talk too much, and usually by that time, my wife's like, "Come on, let's go." Too much. But you can see videos of him, of Saint Jacobos, Elder Jacobos at the time, talking with people, and it's in Greek, but he's just talking. He's so fast talking, and he's, talking to these other priests or these elders or these women or young kids, and I don't know, go, search up a picture of Saint Jacobos, and you can see just in his face this love for people and his love for God. It was like when he was around people, those two things intersect. It's like it was just perfectly clear.
Yeah. It's honestly amazing. And we have so many great holy elders from the same time period. The 20th century was full, and I mean full of holy elders like Saint
And
Paisios.
the thing is, they all interacted with each other. So I
Yes.
think
Exactly.
we have Elder Porphyrios, and he actually says about Saint Jacobos. He says, "Mark my words, he's one of the most far-sighted people of our time, but he avoids the attention, so he doesn't get praised because he's so humble." So it's really really nice to think about the fact that Elder Paisios, Elder Porphyrios, Elder Jacobos, they all interacted with each other.
Yes.
In the same period of time.
And a lot of these elders were the spiritual children of Saint Joseph the Hesychast. Like he started the whole resurgence of Mount Athos, basically, and all his spiritual children filled Mount Athos and the monasteries full of other monks. And I've been reading a lot about them lately. For example, Joseph of Vatopedi, who reposed, amazing, holy man, absolutely holy. And same goes for, of course, Ephraim of Arizona, Elder Ephraim of Arizona, who recently reposed. Yep, there he is.
Yeah.
Who
I think
basically
it's
birthed American Orthodoxy. Yes, Bryce, go ahead.
I wanted to add kind of what Carl mentioned that they all kind of communicated together, kept in contact, and I would really, because Father or Michael mentioned the kind of the way that these people just spelled out their love for communication, for children, for all others. I can only imagine, like, I guess being there, kind of seeing them communicate. And I don't know if that's like a weird thing, but because it'd be on such a spiritual level. And I always wonder that when I was just like researching a lot of the fathers.
Yeah, something that I've always been fascinated with, even before I came to Orthodoxy, was I always kind of had this, I don't know, desire to kind of know what makes people tick. Like why do they do the things they do? What's been really interesting is coming to Orthodoxy and sorry if you hear my dog, by the way. I have two big dogs and they love to be wherever I'm at, and I've got them behind a closed door right now, so they're whining in the background.
We love dogs. It's fine.
I bring him in.
Got mine in the backyard right now, so they don't make any noise. Yes.
He's really quiet, but he just wants to come in, and he'll come in for a minute, and then he'll want to go back out, and he'll start yelping. I'm just gonna leave him out. But the interesting thing is, once becoming Orthodox, and not right away, but gosh, I guess like over 12, 13 years, is when I finally began to not understand like intellectually, but starting to read the lives of the saints and these holy elders, seeing that at the end of the day, everything that they do is otherworldly. It's not like me when I wake up in the morning and like the first thing I have to do. I mean, they had these things, right? Like they would go to the restroom or whatever. But it's like that's kind of my focus. I don't want it to be. I want my focus to be like my eyes open, and the first thing I'm like, Kyrie Jesu Christe eleison, right? Like I want my prayer to be the first thing. I want to go and pray orthros and then start my day, because I still have to work a job. But everything that these holy elders did, they did all of their normal things, their jobs, like whether it was being an abbot or being the spiritual child of somebody, and going through, like they all went through the same kind of similar phases that you and I might go through. But their love for God at the end of their life, like their love for God is what won out. And I guess I'm kind of saying, like we have the expression, in the U.S., like, well, duh, like that was their life. But to see it, especially in these, in the elders and saints that lived during our time, like, don't let me forget, but I've never told this story like publicly, but maybe before the cast is over, give me about 10 minutes and I'll tell you about my interactions with Yeronda Ephraim of Arizona.
Oh, you had interactions with him, actually.
Absolutely, yeah.
I would love to hear one, at least.
Sure, yeah. I'll tell you the story. Well, if you give me 10, 15 minutes at the end, I'll tell you the whole story. I don't want to take away from these other great saints first, and I know Yeronda he would probably never want to be talked about, but just very real connection. Even though, and I'll give you this hint, we never spoke a word. We never spoke a word to each other. And if I had known back then what I know now, I think I would have drawn so close to him. Like nothing would have stopped me from spending time at the monastery.
Yeah. He was mainly at St. Anthony's, right?
Yeah, St. Anthony's down in Arizona. We're about probably an 18-hour drive, maybe 20-hour drive from here, if you just drive straight.
Yeah.
Yeah, he actually he opened a lot of monasteries all over the United States, and one of them is actually in Florida, about like, I think it's like 3-4 hours away from me. It's on the other side of the state because I live on the eastern side and it's on the western side. But yeah,
I believe the elder there, Yeronda Polycarpos.
Is that who it is?
Yeah, Polycarp, Yeronda Polycarp. He's the elder that's there.
Wow.
And I think he's from Australia originally.
Oh wow. I was telling them before this, before we started recording, I was like, man, in order to prepare, I should have just gone and visited the monastery over the weekend and come back.
You should have, yeah. Well, you still have time, and I definitely advise you to visit monasteries because it has a healing power.
Yeah,
We just did recently
as well.
Yeah.
I highly recommend it. When I talk to people one-on-one, I don't go out of my way to, I guess, start conversations to then spiritually direct people. Probably 15 years ago, Deacon Michael would have, but not now. But when it happens, I try to encourage people, like, at least once a year, try to take a pilgrimage, especially if you're only within like 3 hours or 4 hours of a monastery. Go multiple times, because let's just be honest, like, in these days that we're living, when Christ became incarnate, the judgment became real. Judgment was upon the earth, and we are in the last days. Like, once he just became incarnate, and so we obviously see the things that go on around the world. And all I can say is, I don't care what the world does. Let the world do the world. But what we do and how we react to it is important. And nothing changes for us as Orthodox Christians. If the world completely goes to hell in a handbasket, we should still be praying, receiving the holy mysteries, loving our neighbor, like those things. It's like nothing ever changes. So whether we're like Father Arseny, right? He's not a Greek saint, but Father Arseny. If we're like Father Arseny and we're in a gulag, we're in a prison, nothing changes. Like, might be hard, but we still pray, and we.
Of course, it's the most important thing.
I was gonna say what I like about all these saints from the last century is how humble they were. So if you want to read about them, usually you're not going to read their first-hand sources. You're going to read a biography about their lives and someone talking about how they lived their lives. Whereas if you read like an early church father, you'll be reading their writings directly.
Right.
So that's something I just wanted to point out. And it's good because you see the faith didn't just like they're born as saints, and it was only in the early church that we have saints. It's a continuous thing. You keep seeing new saints, and they keep appearing, and anyone can be a saint. You don't need to be like, people think that saints come out of the womb and they're just so perfect just from the outset, but the truth is they're exactly like all of us.
They come out golden, like
Yeah.
Yeah. People think
like uncreated light around them and like divine fire pouring
I was gonna say they just come out emanating uncreated light somehow.
Right.
So,
well, to be really honest, this is what happens whenever we are baptized and chrismated, right? When whether we were cradle or we're converts, like, being baptized is not just a baptism of water, it's a baptism of fire. And you're being baptized into Christ. In fact, it brings up an interesting, like, I've had in the world of converts, this comes up sometimes, and I know it comes up within the Discord, in the Ask the Priest channel. There's been questions about, like, I was baptized, Roman Catholic, or I was baptized as a Mormon or whatever. Why do I have to be rebaptized? Well, I think it's just in the statement that was just given. Like, what were you baptized into, right? If you were baptized into, like, First Baptist Church down the street, well, now you're being baptized into Christ in his one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. So, a touchy subject, but this is what the church has always done. And it's that fire that we're baptized into, that cleansing fire, that when we emerge from the font, like, you're the closest you're going to ever come to being like Adam before the fall. Like, that's it.
True.
So some saints do come out, of the womb, but most of us come out of the font, I would say.
Well, yeah. Clear example is Saint John the Baptist, who basically was already, of course, a saint when he came out of the womb. We have
He's
two
the patron
Serbians
saint of
in here as well. Sorry?
I was just saying, he's the patron saint of our parish, Saint John the
Oh.
Baptist.
There you go. Everything is connected. We have two Serbians in the chat. You talked about Saint Sava before.
Yes. So for the viewers who never heard about Saint Sava, he was the first patriarch of Serbia. He basically brought all of the common people in Serbia orthodoxy. Because back in his time, of course, the royalty, they were already Orthodox for some years. But some peasants in the villages they still had their pagan beliefs. And during his adult life, Saint Sava, he rejected all his royalty. He didn't want to be a part of that. He didn't desire to everything that's worldly. So he fled from the castle and secretly made his way to Mount Athos, where he stayed there and became a monk. And then after a time, even though his father at first was very angry with him and disagreed, he later joined him in the monastery. And Saint Sava, he built the first and only Serbian monastery on Mount Athos, named Hilandar. And later, when Saint Sava returned to Serbia, when they got the approval in Constantinople that they can have their own patriarchy, he returned to Serbia to be the first patriarch. And he said something very important for the Serbian tradition in stone. Because back then, a lot of Serbian families, they celebrated one of the pagan gods. So instead of that, nowadays Serbians celebrate a family patron saint. Mine, for example, is Saint John the Baptist, who we briefly mentioned earlier.
Yeah, very big patron saint in Serbia.
I didn't know that about the Serbians, that it took them that long for the villagers to convert. I had no idea, so that's interesting. Was it Serbia? Was it the whole Yugoslavia region back then, and that kind of happened across the board? No, okay.
Well, it depends.
Yugoslavia didn't exist yet. In the medieval.
Were they kind of I'm not too good with geographical locations, but
the thing that united them in the end was Christianity, was Orthodoxy.
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely.
Because you had in the beginning of the Slavic migration to the Balkans, you had like very different tribes. You had in English you would call them the White Croats. Then you had the Serbians. Those were the two major groups, and of course existed some smaller groups. Some groups before that, they migrated west instead of south. So some of them became the Sorbs instead of the Serbs. And of course, at first when they arrived, they were still pagans. But slowly through the Byzantine Empire, they became Christians. First, of course, the royalty accepted the church. Then later on, it took a lot of while for the peasants, because of course illiterature was very high at that time, and they didn't know any better till they understood that. But with the works of Saint Sava, with his showing of what is very important, and that's very common among all of the saints, with his humility, he showed the common folk how mighty Christ is, and that made everybody convert to Christianity.
I'm sorry if I'm interrupting people, because I can't see anybody on this podcast with my setup. So I'm sorry if I'm being awkward. But he became a national hero and a huge legend. And I think that being an elder of the Serbian church, it would be funny to share anecdotes about him, people's history about him. Just to show how important he was. I traveled visiting Serbia. I traveled to the countryside and talked to peasants nowadays who have this oral history of Sveti Sava inventing windows, being responsible for architecture. Also, a massive legend about.
I thought you were talking about the computer windows. I was like, huh?
No.
I thought it was Bill Gates.
No. Windows, in houses and stuff. And also, popular history wants you to believe that Saint Sava was able to turn into a wolf and talk to animals. So he really did replace pagan beliefs within Serbian people.
Can I just because I think there's also another national hero in Serbia that I can tell you for certain does not get lost on me and my wife and many other Orthodox Christians. I'm gonna call him saint, but he's not canonized. But Patriarch Pavle, what like an absolute beautiful gem of a Christian and a man. We have a little icon, like it's a picture, but it's kind of iconic, I should say. It's not an icon of him on our altar upstairs, and just absolutely love him.
In my apartment in Serbia, I don't have it anymore. I got it through school, but yeah, I never met him actually, because he died when I was pretty young. I'm 21 now, so I never got the opportunity to see him or speak with him. But I remember how much he meant to us, being kids in Serbia, and how big of a symbol he was. So it's surprising to me, but also great that you know about him.
Oh, thank God. He's wonderful. His funeral, from what I've seen, like absolutely shut down Serbia. Like it took, if I remember, it was like days for people to get through and to venerate him. And like, this is the what we were talking about early on. Like at the end of someone's life, like very few start off as saints, but to see like that love of not only for God, but for people manifest at the end of their life, Patriarch Pavle is one of them for sure.
It shows, I think it's cool with Saint Saba and these others. That's just, I mean, they're so humble, but they united a whole country. They united this insane amount of people in faith and community just by, through Christ. And I think it's such a unique, because I live in America, we don't have that. We'll have like people like, you could say like George Washington, like kind of like got together and like united the country at the beginning, or started it as far as politically. But with people like Saint Sava, and they connect everyone on a much more real scale. And with like Serbia is one of the most about beautiful Orthodox countries today, and it's incredible just to see that and hear it.
Can we talk about that for a second? Actually, you bring up a really good point, and it started with Saint Saba, like this uniting of people, and being from America as well. Like I'm right there with you. You didn't say it, but I'll say it because I'm that guy. Lord have mercy. But there's the world unites around like Trump 2024, like he's going to make some big comeback and politically save us all, right? And I think this is it's not just a challenge. We'll call it a challenge. It's not just a challenge for people in the world who this is where they put their trust. I mean, they're betting on the next political savior, if you will. And I remember friends of ours that run Deaf to the World, like there was a graphic that was put out, no political savior, because there's no such thing as like that political party or person, no matter if you're in the US or in some other country, like it's not going to save you. It's going to bring unity, right? The world's version. It's going to bring unity, but only Christ brings union. And that what you're talking about on a higher level, these are some of the challenges we're going to have to work through, not only as men, here in this call, but as people who are learning to love God and to love people. Like we're going to have to watch out for these pitfalls, whether it's, sports or philosophy or politics or even nationalism, like my nationality won't save me. I mean, I'm a mutt because I live in America, but if I was Serbian, and I was like, rah, 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 Serbia, it's not going to save me. But true union, in Christ saves. So I'll shut up.
People think that. People always.
Father, that was. Yeah, sorry, go ahead. I cannot see anybody, so I'm sorry if I'm interrupting people because I can't see when you're going to speak.
You're good.
I was just going to say, people always conflate nationality with, specifically, I notice in the East at least, they always conflate nationality with being, correct. So if your nationality is, whatever the faith is, then you're correct. That's the conflation in the East, which they seem to make a lot of the time. And because of that, you often see that people make this straw man where they can attack you by saying that because people think like that, it must be true, and then You're just using it as an avenue to discredit your entire argument, basically. So that's something I want to point out. So again, Orthodoxy is not for the East or the West, and whether you're a Greek, a Slav, whatever you are, I think OMS said this in the last video. It doesn't make a difference. So anyone can be Orthodox.
It really
it's for
doesn't.
everyone.
Nor Jew, nor Greek, right?
Right.
Yep, exactly.
That's key.
So,
Because think
Exactly.
about what we're trying to do, right? Forgive me. There's the delay, in the thing, so please forgive me. Not purposely trying to step on. But what you said is absolutely right. Like what is not in the kingdom is that kind of ideal, like individualism, like my will, I'm Greek, I'm American, I'm conservative, I'm a Bears fan, I'm a football fan. Like none of that exists because in the kingdom, which is what we're participating in here now, in hopes that we will continue to participate in eternity, Christ is everything, right?
he,
And
he,
so,
yeah, he truly is. And back on the topic a little bit, Mount Athos is clearly an example of this. People often think there's only Greek monks in Mount
mhm,
Athos, but they're so diverse. I've seen stories of Dutch monks, which is a very liberal atheist country. I've seen stories of Serbian monks, Greek monks, even African American monks.
Yeah.
Um, so it's very diverse, and orthodoxy is for all. And Mount Athos is a clear example. And Mount Athos is truly a blessing for everyone. It's a beacon of light in these modern times for me. Um, I I watch a lot of advice coming from the elders from Mount Athos, and I'm just so glad we have such a beacon of orthodoxy in this world. Bryce, did you want to comment
If
on that?
I may, I wanted to interject with this idea being really well reflected in the Psalm 117, 118, which you uploaded on your YouTube channel in English in the American Orthodox Chants playlist. And it says, I don't know it by heart, especially like I've listened to it a couple of times, but it says, all nations bow to God, like all houses, the house of Israel bow to God. Then it lists like, have faith not in princes, have faith not in external powers, but have faith in the Lord. And it's so beautiful and it sounds great.
And I want to reflect that in my channel as well. You can just take a look at my channel. You have diverse Orthodox chants from Greek to native Alaskan Orthodox chants. So I really want to reflect my channel, because indeed often people think, oh, it's only for Slavs and Greek and Romanians and whatever, but it really isn't. It's for everyone. And if you're watching and you're thinking, oh, I cannot go to that Greek church because I'm Greek, don't think that.
yeah.
Orthodoxy is for
Yeah,
all.
definitely.
Just go.
If I may ask a
Everybody's
question,
welcome.
like I know it's a little bit off topic, but the father is here, and I feel like it's a fitting question to the topic we addressed right now. I love listening to this psalm and this chant because it is something I do struggle with myself. I don't necessarily always think of God first, especially like growing up in Serbia. You definitely grow up nationalist. But when I try to bring, now that I live in France, when I try to bring French people to the Serbian church, they all often tell me that they feel like they are betraying, their country going to a, like an Orthodox church, because Orthodoxy is not from Western Europe. They feel like they are not necessarily, honoring their ancestors who are Catholic, Roman Catholic. What would you say to that? How would you answer that?
It's probably more common than and not localized. That's an international, probably that's a worldly challenge, meaning that like every culture, every people are facing that or have been faced with it. I'm going to answer the question, but I'm going to answer it in a way that may not directly answer your question. So forgive me. I would say that coming from a convert perspective, who was, and the converts that I know, we were constantly drilled into our heads as former Protestants, evangelical Christians, and not so much with the other religious faiths that I was into, which I'll say a little bit about that, but definitely from an evangelical perspective, saving the world basically is on your shoulders. You have to go and preach the gospel and make sure people get saved. And I would say that while this is a commandment, right? Well, it's one of the commands to go forth and make disciples. Like, we have to take that in context of what was being said. And so it's not up to you or me or OMS or anyone to like bring someone to the church. God can use us. But I think our focus, if I may say this, our focus should always firstly be, am I living the spiritual life? Like, am I living the spiritual life? If I'm living the spiritual life, that's an umbrella, right? Everything that comes underneath that. If I'm truly living the spiritual life and I desire union with God, because let's just step back for a second and talk about, very briefly, what is the purpose of Christianity? It's not just union, like we said, but it's really, when you boil it down, it's to know God and to be known by him, right? To know God and to be known by him. If that's our goal, first, nothing will stand in our way. I mean, we might have to, the old man has to get out of the way eventually. We might still trip and fall and stumble, but the difference is, like warriors, we fall down, we get up. We fall down, we get up. And we always return to Christ. So back to, if we're living the spiritual life, it's not that we're sinless, it's not that we're perfect, and it's not that we're holy, it's that we're becoming holy. And my point to answering your question this way is that if we're close to people, because just like Christ is relational, right? He created us because he loves us, and God has always desired to dwell among mankind. From the first covenant in Eden to the last and final covenant of Christ. Like, he's always wanted to dwell with us here, so that he could bring us back into eternity. So my point is, if we have relationships with people, some things, like them asking you questions or being interested in the things that you believe, if they truly love you, those topics will come up. And it's just my experience. Like, I just turned 49. I've been around a lot of people. I've had a lot of relationships, both really close and not so close. But if someone really wants to know about you and they really are into something you're into, they're going to ask questions. So I say that in the context of, if you were to just try to bring someone into the church, like, hey, why don't you come visit? There's probably going to be some natural barriers. One being, like you said, they feel like they're going to betray France and betray their ancestors. I mean, this perfect example is, I have some friends who are, I don't want to say Odinists, but they're really Odinists, right? It's all about like Valhalla awaits, like Odin Father has blessed me with blah blah blah. It's very like warrior-esque. They're not
Neo-pagan,
Christian.
yeah.
They're neo-pagan, and I get it, because that's attractive. Like, seeing, like, I mean, if you've watched Vikings or you see any picture of a Viking, you're like, I don't want to be this weak, like, Western dude. I'm going to grow out a beard, get it braided, grow out my long hair, and I'm going to go throw logs around and, like, be a Viking.
It's faux masculinity.
It's very masculine, right? And it's natural that this speaks to this generation, because we've spent the last probably 100 years being demasculated. But I've had friends where, like, talking about Orthodoxy, because they're interested in me as a friend, they ask questions naturally. If I just tried to grab them and say, hey, come to the church, or why don't you come to church and check out Orthodoxy, there's a barrier, unless, like, I have that relationship with them.
Yeah, definitely. I don't want to keep going on my topic too long, because I know we should get back on topic. But
No,
it's a great topic. We don't have to talk about one topic in the
Yeah.
episode. That's
Well,
fine.
thank you. I have this one person who always keeps asking me questions about Orthodoxy. Most of the time, questions that are so so deep, and I cannot answer them at all, and very specific. But they're just afraid. They have a certain anxiety around coming to liturgy, and I'm not very experienced. Like, I was born into a Christian family, and I went to church as a young boy. I even served in church, but then I stopped going as a teen, and now that I'm in my 20s, I just started going regularly again. So, being not so experienced, I don't know how to bring someone who's anxious to church, like what to say, how to tell them it's going to be okay. There's no like pressure put on you when you're there and stuff.
Yeah, I would tell them. So first and foremost, that's totally normal to feel anxious towards something you don't know. I mean, unless you're like a Superman or a Superwoman, you know, in some way, and you just don't care. I was anxious the first time I went to the Orthodox Church, the first time I visited.
Yeah.
But I would recommend, don't bring them to liturgy. Bring them to Vespers. And if you have a weekly Vespers, like not a great Vespers, like Saturday night's typically a great Vespers. If you have like a Wednesday Vespers or any other day, or maybe a Paraclesis service. And I say that because in my experience, first and foremost, the Divine Liturgy is the pinnacle of our worship as Orthodox Christians, right? And I'm going to use a really terrible analogy, but it's like bringing someone who's never been to, like, I don't know, like a ritual sacrifice, right? And you're asking them, hey, come, and they come, and they're like, they're like, oh my gosh, I don't even know what I just experienced. They don't know what to think, right? And so I think if you bring them to a Vespers or even like a reader's service of some kind, they'll see the beauty of the church, right? Because the temple, even if it's just a mission, a small church, there's going to be icons. You're going to be there. People will be there. It's a lot less intimidating, and it's kind of maybe like, you know, when you wade into the ocean when it's really cold. You know, Orthodoxy is kind of like that. It's a wake up in a way, even if you're not baptized and chrismated. So as they come in, they can participate in as much as they're able. They can see the icons. They might ask you questions about icons. If there's incense, they'll ask you questions about the incense. I found that to be a little less anxiety inducing.
That's
also
great advice.
I wanted to just quickly say something. The first time I ever went to a liturgy, I was so terrified. I was like I was sitting in my car, like, because I came from a Protestant background, so I was like, what am I doing? Well, how did I get myself here? How did I get myself into this situation? Why am I sitting here? And then I was just like, all right, I just gotta go in, and then I just went in.
Yeah.
By the way, I just need to ask this.
Your camera.
Were you thinking about? Oh,
I was.
By the way, Sky, were you thinking during the car ride? Okay, Milos has been telling me about this Orthodox Church for like weeks. I need to go now.
So,
or he will ask me again, why didn't you try it out this time?
so I like put it off for weeks because I was like, oh, what am I gonna wear? I don't want to look like this, or I don't want to look like that. So it's like constant excuses and all that. And then I was talking to Milos and other people like Steven and all of them. And they were like, bro, your fit is fine. Just go and just go do it. So yeah.
I remember talking to you about what you like what to wear. I remember that.
Yeah, I was sending like ideas on what I should wear to church as my first liturgy and all that.
Where are we at on time right now?
49 minutes. So if you wanted to make it an hour, he could go into his story about.
Yeah, we would like a story of LDFM.
May it be blessed. I just want to again say thank you for asking me to be on. I'm still just blown away. I don't know if all of you know, but I happened to catch one of the live casts that OMS was doing, and didn't know anything about the channel, but I've been a fan of Orthodox Meme Squad for quite a while. And so I chatted in the chat. Next thing I know, he says, hey, you should join our Discord. So I jump in the Discord. Just so you know, I hadn't been on Discord in a very, very, very long time. And so jumping back in, and then the next thing I know, he's messaging me. And so this has just been it's been a beautiful thing to be a part of OMS. My wife, Diaconisa Irene, is also a part. Like I know she goes back and forth with folks and answers questions. And a lot of people may not get what you started here, Demos. A lot of people may not understand, and that includes clergy. But I get it. I get it because I've grown up. I'm an IT guy, like old IT guy, like 25 years in the industry, from back in the early, networking days to like now where we beam stuff through the air. It's crazy. And I get it. You have created a haven for kids, even as young as like 12, up into young, like adults, a safe place for people to be able to come in, express their views, talk about challenges, ask questions about orthodoxy, and I think it's just a beautiful thing that, as far as I can tell, God's been blessing it. So I continue to pray for you guys, and I won't say any more about that. But thank you. I'm honored that you would have me on.
You're humbling me. Thank you for those words. They really hit me. Thank you so much. And thank you for being here. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank God.
Yeah.
So I was very happy when Demos told me you were going to join our podcast show, because we haven't talked in quite a while. I think since like 2 days after me and Demos did that live stream where you first joined us.
Yep.
So I'm glad that we're finally talking again. And before I forget it, because you were a fan of Patriarch Pavle, so I live near a monastery that he frequently visited. One of his students, he is there in the monastery. So Patriarch Pavle, he would take the bus from Belgrade to a town called Parachin, and then he would walk on foot 2 hours to the monastery. Wow. He never took any fancy cars or had like a driver or spent any church money. He always spent his own money and he rather wanted to take long walks, and he didn't want people to recognize him as the patriarch.
I think he did a good. That picture, that really famous picture of him, where he's in a full stride, like walking, and his exorasa like behind him, and he's got his staff, and he's just zipping along, the sidewalk. That, I think that sums him up. And the picture that on the little card we have is when he was very, very old, like probably just before he reposed, and he just has this light. I mean, this light just beaming from his face. So.
Beautiful.
Exactly. So with that story, I wanted everybody to say, who is on the podcast, if you ever want to go to Serbia and visit that monastery, it's maybe with the car 15-20 minutes away from me. So everybody, tell me beforehand, we can go together to the monastery and visit it.
Everybody visit Milos.
That's what I plan to do.
Everybody
and visit my village as well.
Count me in. I would love
not
to.
Once.
I have to go to Greece first, okay?
Yeah. So, story time.
So story time. Okay. Well, through the prayers of our Holy Fathers and to me, Saint Ephraim of Philotheo in Arizona. So this story starts, and I'm going to try and keep this at like 10 or 15 minutes, but this started when I was a catechumen. My wife and I were catechumens. My friend, now Father Turbo, but back then just Turbo, he had said, "Hey, we need to go to this monastery," and I said, "Fantastic," because my wife and I's entrance into the Orthodox Church really happened through, and it's probably a story for another time, but through Platina and St. Herman of Alaska Monastery, where Father Seraphim Rose of blessed memory is laid at rest now. That was our entrance into Orthodoxy. Our exposure to was very monastic. Although we did attend a local parish in Southern California, where we were being catechized and then eventually baptized and illumined and chrismated. But so going to the monastery was like to me was nothing. I just thought, well, it was everything, but it was like not a big deal. There wasn't a lot of anxiety or anything around it. So we drove all night. We got there late. At the time, Father Markelos, I believe, was the guest master of the guest house. This big monk of a guy. I still remember him. I wish that he was still there, but at last I heard he's on Mount Athos now. And I believe he was ordained to the priesthood. So Hieromonk Markelos, if it's still his name. He greeted us and he says, okay, I have your room. So we stayed in the most common place to stay at St. Anthony's. There's this like kind of bunkhouse underneath the cells that are up top. And the cells that are up top, some of them are monastic, but most of them are, guests who come and stay. You get like a room with two or three beds, kind of real small. And so when you stay underneath, I forget what people call it. I think they just call it the bunkhouse. But it's like basically 15 beds, and you have a little table between you, and there's some icons, but everybody sleeps in the same room. So you share a bathroom, and there's a little kitchen space so that if you want to make coffee or tea, there's like fasting food and stuff there. It really is beautiful. And so we're staying in this bunkhouse. We wake up the next morning, we go to breakfast. Remember, I'm a catechumen, so normally when you go to a monastery, especially an Athonite monastery, the catechumens, if you're a catechumen or not Orthodox, you're not going to eat with the monastic. They'll eat first, and then they go, and then you'll come in, and then you eat. But I ended up going in, and I didn't know, and Turbo didn't say anything to me. I don't blame Father Turbo, but I went in, sat down, we're eating. Someone had climbed up the ambon, the kind of overhang reading area, and they're reading in Greek. I don't understand anything. But there was just this general sense of like sacredness. Like I felt the same thing I felt at Platina, I felt also at St. Anthony's, but I would say even more so at St. Anthony's. So the day goes on. That evening, we wake up. I think we go to bed. We wake up at like midnight, 12:30. We head into the Catholicon for service, right? And so we're there, and again, I don't know anything, so I'm just kind of standing there. I had bought this like new, I don't know, 30 knot or 33 knot prayer rope, and I was trying to stretch it out so I could use it. Probably a common like new Orthodox thing. I was like, I want one of those long ropes that everybody uses. And so I'm stretching it out, and I'm praying the prayer, and Turbo says, oh, come on, get in line. And I didn't know what we were getting in line for. And I asked him, I said, what are we doing? And he says, we're going to go up and get the blessing of the abbot. And I was like, oh, okay, thank God. St. Herman Monastery is Serbian or, Slavic tradition, Russian tradition. So you don't really go up and get the abbot's blessing. You can get that anytime because he's always around. This is Athonite tradition. So, behind the throne for the archbishop, next to that is the smaller throne for the abbot and so on. So we go up there, and I kind of, it's my turn's next, so I make a matanya, and I come up and I put my hands for his blessing, and I say, I think I said like, Father bless, and this beautiful small hand that was just like smooth, skin, smelled very fragrant, comes down and blesses me, and I kiss his hand. And when I look up, I see this face that was, you've probably seen the picture of Elder Ephraim, where it's like, it looks like there's this uncreated light, like from the center of his face. That's how he looked. And so I immediately, after I got the blessing, so he blessed me, and I look up at him, and I kind of smiled, and he smiled at me, and then he reaches his hand over, and he like ruffled the top of my hair. And my hair was really short back then. So I kind of was like, I looked around looking for the light that was shining on his face, but there's no lights. It's literally like the chanter's light. It's a little red, lamp over the chanter stand, and that's it. And candles lit throughout the Catholicon. So there's no lights. So I go back, and I'm taken back. Like this little man smelled like this heavenly incense or this fragrance, and it was just beautiful. So the trip goes on. I help them do some things. We get back in the car. We go home. I get baptized and chrismated with my family. A few years goes by. We do a couple visits up to Platina, and then another opportunity to go to St. Anthony's. So we go back, and same thing. We wake up, 12:30. We go to the Catholicon for services. I know what to expect this time, so I can't wait to get his blessing. And we go in, and same thing. I come around the corner. I make a matanya, a little bit lower this time because now I know who's there. So I make this really low matanya. I come up and I ask for his blessing. He blesses me. I look up into his face, same, radiant, like just very, almost this bluish, greenish light just coming from his face. And he just kind of smiles, and then he ruffles my hair. Second time now, he's ruffled my hair. So I thought, like, I can't wait to talk to him. Like, I want to just talk to him, but I don't know if he speaks English, and I don't speak Greek. At the time, I didn't speak any Greek. So that trip ends. We go back home. A few years goes by. 2015, I think. In the year 2015, we went back for a baptism for my godson. And actually, Geronda Paisios, who's the abbot now, baptized my godson along with the spiritual daughter of Geronda Ephraim, Markella, Mother Markella, at Life Giving Spring, which is in California, Northern California, or Central California area. She was there because she's the godmother. So I had to sit with, first to get his blessing, I had to sit with Geronda Paisios, and that's a conversation for another time. I sat there the whole time talking about tattoos and like just stuff that didn't matter. It was a very humbling and humiliating experience for me. Just to have him say, "Do you know what you're supposed to do as a godfather?" And I said, "I think so. Take him up, Seraphim up for the Eucharist." And he says, and that was it. So we were there for the baptism. My godson's baptized. Later that night, there's services, and I go into the Catholicon. I get Geronda Ephraim's blessing. Same thing. Like this time, I'm really like, because I've looked forward to seeing him for so many years. I make a deep matanya. I get his blessing, and he blesses me, and I kiss his hand, and I look at him in the eyes and the face, and it just, again, this beauty. It brought like, not tears, but just my eyes got moist, because it's hard to stand in the presence of a holy person, and they're holy. And then he ruffles my hair again. He just ruffled the top of my hair. And he did it to my daughter as well, my middle daughter, Zoe. He blessed her and then ruffled her hair. So 2017, we leave California. We move to Idaho. We're changing parishes. We find St. John the Baptist here in Post Falls. Start attending there. Again, it's a longer story that I won't get into this time, but I ran from serving in the church for quite a number of years, like probably nine or 10 years. I felt like God was calling me, like that little, like, hey, serve, like just serve behind the altar, serve as an altar server, sweep, do whatever. But I ran away from it. And so when I got here, talked with my priest, we talked about me serving behind the altar, serving at the altar. And right around, I think it was December 2019, I believe, is when, December 10th, I think, I could be wrong, when Geronda reposed. I had fallen asleep that night. I got up. I saw that there was a text on my phone. So I look at it, and it's my friend. It's about 2:30 in the morning. And my friend says, "Our blessed Geronda has reposed." And it just took all the air out of my sails. Like, I didn't even know. I thought I'd have another opportunity to go see him, to get his blessing. And so I remember falling asleep and, like, not sobbing, but crying. Like, there were tears, and I was just really sad. Bless you.
Thank you.
And so I woke up, went to church. Oh, sorry. Forgetting an important part. I went to sleep. I told my wife that, what happened before I went to sleep. And she says I cried myself to sleep. I don't know. Like, I fell asleep. I don't remember. But when I went to sleep, I woke up in my dream. And and I was standing in the Catholicon at St. Anthony's, and it was like being there for a service. And before I tell you this, like I sent this as a letter to the monastery, to Father Philaretos, who's the abbot, or the I think he's the assistant abbot right now. He was baptized and chrismated into the church in Post Falls. So an American-born, now he's at St. Anthony's as a monastic. It's pretty awesome. But I had sent this to him, and I didn't talk about this to anybody except for my priest at the time. I told him about a month after it happened, and then I didn't bring it up again. My wife told me, "Why don't you write it down?" And so, okay, so I wrote it down, and I didn't talk about it. But in the dream, I woke up. We're in the Catholicon at St. Anthony's, and it's like being at a normal service. And then this woman comes in, and she's sobbing, and she's crying, and she's like, "Our blessed Yoronda, he's died, he's reposed, he's died." And then everybody starts crying and wailing, and not like ethnic Greek wailing, but like crying. so then, like a movie, my dream kind of, it like goes black, and then again opens up in my dream, and we're in this small little chapel, or like what looks like a large cell, like a monastic cell. And there's people in front of me, and everyone's going up to this little bed on the ground that has, now you've seen pictures of our blessed Yoronda laying there, right, in repose, and he's got the monastic cross, the like flag or the blanket over him, and he's holding like the gospel, and he has his prayer rope, and he's in repose. I had never seen that. So I'm seeing this in the dream. People are going up and they're making a prostration, they're kissing his hand, they're kissing his cheeks, they're crying, and then they move on, and the next person comes. Well, it comes to my turn, and I'm not like sobbing, but there's tears on my cheeks. And so I prostrate, I make a prostration, I kiss his hand, I kiss his forehead, I kissed his cheek, and I don't remember words that I said, but I remember thinking, like, why didn't I get to talk to you? Like, how come we never spoke? And then as I'm sitting there, and I didn't notice this before, but like he had this, do you know what mosquito net looks like? Like it kind of, like sometimes they zip up, but it's a real fine mesh. If you're from Florida, you know what mosquito netting is. So I didn't realize it. He had this like kind of netting over him. And then while he's laying there, so he's laying down, and I'm like here, and he just looks over at me, unzips this thing, stands up out of the little bed he's in, and walks out of the camera, right? Like, so I'm the camera. He walks out of my sight like he forgot his keys or something, right? Like, oops, I forgot my keys. Let me go get the keys. He comes back and lays down, and he lays down on the bed. But before he lays down all the way and closes his eyes, he looks at me and he says, "I'm leaving you long underwear." You know what long underwear is? If you live in a cold place, long underwear.
Yep.
So in my dream, I'm like, what does this even mean? And so I get up. He goes back to sleep. Again, closes. Next scene. I'm walking down a corridor, and I know exactly where it's at St. Anthony's. I'm walking above that bunkhouse, and I'm walking down the corridor, and there's a door at the end of the corridor that goes to a staircase that leads down into like a parking lot where they park their trucks, their work trucks and things. And so I go down this corridor, and I'm walking like regular speed, but everything around me is going super fast, like really, really fast. And I can see through the walls, and people are stealing things. They're taking icons. They're taking like anything they can get their hands on. They're taking from St. Anthony's. And I get to the end of the hallway. I open the door. I go down the stairs. And as I go down the stairs, I reach the bottom. And I'm telling this in this way specifically because we're all males that are on this cast. But I know that there's other males that are listening. And I hope this is an encouragement to you to struggle, to fight the fight, right? When you have a temptation. So I get to the bottom of the stairs and I look out, and the light from the building only goes so far. Well, at the end of that light, there's these two darker women, scantily clad, like they barely have any clothes on, and they're dancing with one another, like not in a good way. And I didn't even think. All I did was immediately when I saw it, my hand came up, and I'm not a priest, so I'm not going to make the sign here, but like with a priestly blessing, I made the sign of the cross and just went like this, and they literally just vaporized into ash. And so hopefully you guys can still hear me. My microphone just hit me. Okay. So
we can.
Thank God. So and then I woke up and I went to church, and as an altar server, I was serving. Well, then like a month goes by. During that time, my priest and I had talked about me being tonsured as a reader. And I told him, my response was always the same. I said, if whatever you need, Father, I'll serve, whatever you need. So when I told him about this dream, he kind of chuckled and he laughed and he says, I said, yeah, that says I'm leaving you long underwear. And he says, well, you know what long underwear is? And I said, yeah, like thermals, like when it's cold. And he says, yeah, but long underwear is also kind of what priests, what they call like the stikara underneath, right? The stikar. And I was like, okay. It's like, well, I don't know, if the priesthood is for me. Like, how does somebody know that, right? I'm 49. My family's already, like, my girls are 18. They're 18, 17, and 13. They're growing. I'm not like a 20-year-old going to seminary and then preparation for the priesthood. So then time goes by, right? And I don't really tell anybody about this. And then I'm tonsured. 6 months later, I'm elevated to the subdiaconate. And then about a year went by, and then I was ordained to the diaconate. And all I can say is, like, we shouldn't put too much stock into dreams and visions and things like that, right? Because the devil uses those to confuse us or distract us, according to what the fathers say. But I look back and I look at my relationship with Yaronda, and I don't want to go into the details because I'd rather not expose the people, but I now have like almost a direct connection to him physically. And all those miracles that you hear about, the people talking about, Elder Ephraim did this and he did this and he said that same little meek, small man who was spiritually a giant, who, to the best of my knowledge, wanted to just be a hermit, a hesychastic hermit on Mount Athos, on the Holy Mountain. His spiritual father, St. Joseph the Hesychist, said, no, you're going to go and you're going to plant. So if God can work the miracles that he worked through this little meek man who absolutely loved like no other love before God, then he can do anything through anyone. But it obviously takes our involvement, right, to that synergistic relationship. Because like you said in the beginning of the podcast, like 17, 18 plus monasteries that this meek, man established. And what a blessing. What a blessing. And I know that there's controversy out there. There's people who have tried to bring things against his monasteries. But after visiting multiple monasteries of Yaronda Ephraim, I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt, the seeds for the flowers that Girantisa Macrina and St. Joseph planted, that St. Joseph planted and Girantisa Macrina and, to me, St. Ephraim planted here in the U.S. And also on Mount Athos, they have sprouted into beautiful, beautiful gardens with fragrant flowers, whether it's going to Goldendale to St. John the Baptist Forerunner Baptist Monastery in Goldendale, Washington, or it's at St. Anthony's in the desert. They are these beautiful oases of like fundamental orthodoxy. And in the days going forward, as things get more crazy in the world, and they will, being able to flee to a monastery, to spend time, to take a pilgrimage to listen to the Yarondas or Yarontisas that are there, and to have the spiritual counsel will be like, it'll be honey. It'll be like pure honey. So that's my story. Forgive me.
No, it was a
Wonderful
beautiful story. Thank you for sharing that with
Yeah,
us.
thank you so much.
And
Thank God.
I think that's a beautiful ending to our podcast today as well. So I want to thank Father Deacon Michael for joining. I really appreciate it, sharing your wisdom with us all. Thank you
Thank
to the
God.
other guys as well for being here again. Even if we all have different time zones, we still come together. Maybe we'll see Father Deacon Michael in the future again. Who knows?
May it be blessed.
Thank you for watching, and see you next time. Bye bye.
See you.